Hey y'all, Random here. Wait a minute, that's not right. Hey guys, it's me, and today I'm talking about none other than our favorite mysterious bear, Fredbear. I mean, what's not to love? They're yellow, they screw William over. They're yellow. Honestly, despite not being a well-described character, I like Fredbear as a design, despite what others think. The way he's cloaked in shadow with only his pinprick eyes visible in UCN. The lore we get for the spirits that possess Fredbear in UCN is truly interesting as well. A spirit that'll never rest until William gets the punishment that he deserves. But that's not what this video is about. While I could ramble on forever about that topic, this video is about the two games made by Garrett McKay or GarettTube. I like to call it the Fredbear and Friends duology. So this is going to be a first for this channel. Since I've got two games to talk about, I'm going to have to divide my attention between two games, which is a lot to ask for from a guy like me. One of these games definitely has less substance than the other, so I think I'm going to use less time to discuss the first game so I have more time to focus on the second one. With that being said, let's look at some of Garrett McKay's most popular projects, starting with Fredbear's Fright is a bit of a confusing game. Having been one of Garrett's first projects, it's definitely a bit odd in its story and visual presentation. But anyways, after getting through a pretty cool title screen, you're presented with a newspaper that says that Fredbear's Fright, a new horror attraction, has opened up and are looking for a night guard. You know, your usual FNaF shtick. And, as it turns out, this takes place in the same location from FNaF 1, now spruced up with decoration from the various FNaF pizzerias and even having Freddy's head from the original FNaF 1 hung up in the office. You can even boop him. But it's obvious that things have changed. I mean, even the entire right door has been walled up with only a keypad and vent to replace it. Apart from this, the phone guy tells us about the location with some of the best voice acting I've ever seen.
Around the shopping suits, etc. Just kidding.
With him only being rivaled by Greg and Lisa from version 1 of FNATI, the phone guys from FNAF Revamp, and the phone guys from TRTF3. Anyways, moving swiftly on, I'll discuss the mechanics. Dismantle Fredbear is quite simple. He moves slowly, and when he enters, he must use the lever at the top of the screen to release water, so the spring locks make him leave. Think of the main night gameplay from Jollies 3. Even so, Fredbear is the only character to use this mechanic. I honestly wish more characters required you to use the lever because it's pretty unique and plot relevant since most of the cast are spring-lock suits. Nonetheless, let's move on to the rest of the characters. Spring Bonnie and the hand puppet Fredbear and Spring Bonnie, which are weird because they almost look like Spawn edits. We'll first walk through what I guess is the basement, and then they try entering your office through the vent on your right. This is an alright mechanic. Nothing crazy, but it's here. Next up is Prototype, the Foxy of this game. He starts by being deactivated in the entrance of the horror attraction, but gradually comes to life as he grabs a latex mask from a nearby box, and then he books it to your office, where you have to then shut the door. Once again, this is an alright mechanic. Now, Seiki isn't that unique in terms of mechanics either. He'll come through the facility until he reaches a left door where you must close it. But Scrap Fredbear is pretty interesting. He'll give you a call on the phone and, using the keypad on the right, you have to press whatever number he says in the call. All the mechanics are okay, but in terms of FNAF fan games, it's just more of the same. Nothing here really breaks the mold, if you know what I mean. Anyways, everything's the same in nights 1 through 3 until you get to night 4 where, of course, the phone guy gets killed by Prototype when we get a reveal of our newest addition to the roster, Fright. Fright is an amalgamation of all the characters, cause why not, lol. He of course has the combined mechanics of Spring Bonnie and Mouseki, but he moves pretty fast, so you better keep an eye on him. After night 4 ends, you get killed by Fright anyways and are taken to a cutscene where your POV is the phone guy from OG FNAF 1. And we get to see what happened to him on night 4. The power goes out and he grabs the phone and records his last message from night 4, even though the power is out, and we get jump scared by Golden Freddy and we move to night 5. Night 5 shows what takes place on the final night of the original FNAF. You're in a spring-lock suit in the parts and service unit, and you have to keep the spring-lock suit from killing you, while also making sure that you're not moving when Freddy or Bonnie come in through the front door. You have to wait for them to leave before you can wind the suit again. You also have to fend off Golden Freddy hallucinations by holding space when they appear. After that, you've officially beat the main night gameplay, but we're not done yet. You still got the Insane Mode and the Custom Night. Insane Mode is pretty much a harder night 3, but after you beat it, you get a cutscene opening the box from FNAF 4, and a reveal of a cassette tape playing a cassette labeled Afton, with the subtext Training 1 under it, in the cutscene end. And that's not even the last of it. There's some stuff I didn't even have time to mention, but I'll get to the designs now. Every design here is pretty solid. Fredbear and Spring Bonnie are fairly standard, the hand puppets are nothing much as well, but I think this game shines with its purely original characters. Scott Fredbear, despite only being an endo with a Fredbear head, is a pretty cool design. Mouseki is pretty unique and is one of the more interesting designs too. Prototype is pretty interesting as well, being an almost rudimentary endo with nothing but glowing beady white eyes with a small black pupils that are genuinely unsettling, although you don't see them when it's jump scared at him donning the latex mask in the box. Fright's just your standard amalgatronic, yes, I just made that up, but I do like the broken face to reveal the endo underneath. And yeah, I think that's everything I wanted to cover with this game. All things considered, it's a pretty average FNaF fan game. It's not bad or anything, but it's just pretty standard. The models are good, the environments are okay, and the gameplay is pretty fun. With that said, I give Fredbear's Fright 8 Spring Bonnie hand puppets out of 10 spray bottle levers. And now I can get to the real meat of this video, Fredbear's friends left to rot. So when Fredbear's Fright came out, it had actually grown a substantial amount of popularity with many people playing it. The game really was Garrett's big break as a game developer. Thus, he thought what better decision than to follow it up with a game that expands on this AU's lore and general world. Ergo, he got to work on the new game, and on July 16, 2018, Fredbear and Friends Left to Rot released. This game is massive, with hours upon hours of content in store. Another interesting thing about this game is that each section has a different set of mechanics, so I'll probably go section by section instead of discussing overall gameplay since I feel that wouldn't be doing it justice. Anyways, after starting up the game, we see an opening cutscene of Fredbear with wrapping over his mouth, probably after the bite of A3, with a sign that says out of order. We're told by a voiceover that the company is officially rebranding with new animatronics on the stage to entertain kids as we remove the suits of Fredbear and Spring Bonnie and put the unwithered suit pieces on them. If I had to take a guess, this probably takes place after the events of FNaF 4, with Fazbear Entertainment trying to rebrand to get away from the incident. Out of this tape, we watch another cutscene of a car window passing multiple streetlights in the dead of night as we get a go-over of a plan by an unknown person who I'll refer to as Radio Guy. Radio Guy tells us that we were hired by an unknown company to do some investigation on a facility in the middle of nowhere. This intro is pretty vague on what the story exactly is, but what FNaF game isn't. Once we get to a set of doors, we enter the facility and are brought to our first of many rooms, the observatory. The observatory is a pretty simple room with some simple mechanics. We're sat in a room facing a TV with the long hallway and a table to the right of us. Our objective is to disconnect the audio and video of each of the cameras so we can move on, but the animatronics aren't having that. Radio Guy says that the animatronics on the first floor of the facility act as security, so if Fredbear and Spring Bonnie see us, we have to duck under the table until we hear the sound cue of them leaving. But we get another new character for this room. It's none other than Prototype. Wait, what do you mean we already saw Prototype in the last game? This is a completely different character. Trust me, my dad works at Garrett. But seriously, in the lore, this Prototype was made to test the facial recognition software we see in FNaF 2. And with that, I think we can get a good idea of the time frame of when this game takes place in FNaF's story. But anyways, back to the observatory. Prototype's thing of this game is light sensitivity, which is present with his mechanics in each room he's in. When he shows up in the camera leading to your office, you have to use a camera light on him to get him to go away. I'd probably disconnect this camera last. And, just like that, we're one down with 4 more to go. The observatory isn't that difficult of a section, but it's a good introduction to the entire atmosphere and feel of this game while also giving a precedent of what's to come. Anyway, back to the plot. After we repeat the observatory, we get another instructional tape, this one beginning to test Freddy's mechanisms. You press the buttons on the remote given to move his jaw, move his body forward, and to make him do a little tee-hee. After that, we are brought to a door while Radio Guy tells us that the first security animatronics are deactivated and that going through the door will lead to the storage room. He says that there are some items we need to get from there. So we walk through and grab a tablet, a remote labeled Max, and some other items. After that, we officially start our second room, the storage room. We face a box with a pair of curtains labeled Max, as well as the remote from before. To the right of us is a door that we need to power up, using a button next to it. When you stop holding the button, the power begins to go down again. In the box with the curtains is a character named, who could have guessed it, Max. He'll slowly try leaving the box at different stages, so when he moves, you have to use the button on the remote to send him back. Think the salvage minigames from Pizzeria Sim. Now, while sounding simple on paper, both factors in this game, the power decreasing and Max, move extremely quickly, so you have to strike a balance between powering up the door while also keeping Max in check. This room can take 3 minutes or 15 depending on how sharp your awareness is. Honestly, this room was stressful, but after you beat it, the door opens and you leave. We got another tape that's supposedly instructing how to test arcade games. The first one you play is Golden Comet, where we play a spring bonnie and we have to shoot rabbits at oncoming pizzas. I know, very weird. But not as weird as the next game. It's called Sneaky Guy, with this ear-bleeding cacophony of notes on the title screen. The aforementioned Sneaky Guy is a Fredbear-like character with a suit and a hat. Definitely not foreshadowing any plot points in the story later on. Anyways, you play it and it's pretty confusing. It's just you as the sneaky guy walking around aimlessly until your entire screen fills with static. The editor says the game died and is surely going to be shipped back to its manufacturer, and the tape ends. After that, we get our first test room 01. Test room 01 is the first oddity we face that makes us question just what kind of facility this is. The room almost looks like a child's room with space decorations all around. But this is in a facility? Just what kind of place in this? Well, I promise we'll get context later. Anyways, we slowly lose connection with Radio Guy, and now for the Mike and Ikes. I mean the mechanics. Sorry, I'm hungry. The room has a door in front of us and a door on the right. Our objective is to slowly open the vent located behind us and escape. The vent also closes slowly when you're not actively holding it. This time around, we've got two threats. Firstly, there's Roger. He's pretty much the puppet from FNaF 2. He's a little wind-up toy hanging from the ceiling that will start slowing down if you're not winding him. Just wind him and you should be fine. But if you don't, and the winding stops, he kills you. The real threat here is the one and only Mouseki, making his grand return. Well, kind of. He's Nightmare Mouseki in this game, and his gimmick is flash beacons. When he comes through the front or right door, just use the flash beacon on him. Once again, both characters in this room are really hyperactive, making it really difficult. But after you open the vent, you escape. Once we get through, we enter a room with a sign that says exit on it. But when we interact with it, we're attacked by what appears to be a Fredbear spring-lock suit, and we pass out. After that new can of worms, we get the POV of a worker at Fredbear's Family Diner as they run through the spring-lock tapes from FNaF 3. We watch as they open the spring locks and put the suit on. As they put it on, they start hyperventilating, and their version gets blurry and the audio gets distorted. Then the cutscene ends. We're brought to the third most complex room in the game, Test Room 02. Test Room 02 is an absolute beast of a room. There is so much to keep track of. For starters, we have a door in front of us and a window behind us. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. Firstly, we have a gas mask due to the toxicity of this area. When we have our gas mask up, our toxicity meter goes up. If it hits 100, you're dead. But the only way you can use the cameras is to have your mask up. So you're almost put on a timer every time you want to check the cameras. Now I can discuss characters. Ron Freddy and Ron Chica both have the same mechanic. They try to come through the vents, so you have to deactivate the ventilation system to keep them out. But a reminder that this area's air is highly toxic. So when you deactivate the vents, the speed of your toxic meter when you have your mask up skyrockets. So you have to be careful when the vents are deactivated as possible. With Rotten Bonnie, he slowly comes through the window I mentioned before. When he leans into the window, use the fan to get rid of him. He's the only character you can deal with when your mask is on. Ron Foxy's the last character, but boy is he a doozy. You'll be in the hallway in front of you where you have to press the power button next to the door that makes everything shut off. And I mean everything. You are incapable of doing any other mechanic until you turn the power back on. You have to be really quick with it. All these mechanics can really keep you on your toes, but I must say that I found a way to cheese it. If you have the vents deactivated 24/7, yes, your toxicity meter will increase drastically, but the only characters you must quickly take your mask off for is Foxy. Half the roster is eliminated. Now, did I do this in my original playthrough? No, but I did use it for something later. Anyways, the objective is just survive for 6 minutes with all this in mind. After you do, we watch another scene where we clean the Golden Freddy suit. Pretty short, honestly. And now it's time for the last room, the final test.
Welcome to your final test. I'm Mr. Beast.
We can scrap the S, because I never missed it. This room is the second most complex for me. Everything in this night is so incremental, but it just comes together so well. Well, let me give a rundown. So, the floor you're located in is an almost flipped version of FNaF 1, where you're on the opposite side of the pizzeria. Oh, right. Actually, the place you're in isn't even a real pizzeria. It's called the Mog's Pizzeria, so I guess this facility just has a fake version of the FNaF 1 location. But anyways, the office you're in is like the FNaF 3 office, but it has doors on both sides. We have 4 whole characters this time around. First up is Security Bonnie. When he leans into the right door of your office, you can shock him with a pair of jumper cables to send him back. Next is Security Freddy. He'll look through the window in your office and you put a piece of paper on his eyes to send him back. Okay. Thirdly, there's Security Fredbear. Sometimes his face will cover your camera monitor where you'll have to reboot the cameras to get rid of him. And the last character I'll discuss, ever, is Suit. He starts in the backstage and you have to slowly but surely send him to the mock office on the opposite side of the pizzeria. He had 2 things as defense against him. First is the return button on the controller you picked up earlier. Clicking the button sends him back a camera. And locate, which tells you which cameras he's on. Honestly, this room was a pretty fun time. I like the way all the mechanics almost interfere with the other. This might be my favorite room out of the main 5. But anyways, when Suit reaches the mock office, all the power goes out and then Suit appears in front of you. You pull up another remote you grabbed from the storage room earlier, but the remote's broken and Suit presumably kills you. After, you get CCTV of the bathroom camera from FNaF 1 as Golden Freddy appears and gets close to the camera. And you got the tragic ending? Wait, did we miss something? Well, after the final test, you unlock the extras, which includes the minigames, and if you walk a specific way in Sneaky Guy, you get a number code. Remember that cutscene after the observatory? Well, if you go left instead of forward, you see a safe with a keypad, and if you use the code from Sneaky Guy, you get a working version of the remote from the storage room. When you get the cutscene after night 5, you click the button and it sends off the spring locks and kills the person inside. And I do mean the person inside. After, you get an alternate version of the cutscene from the beginning where Fredbear and Spring Bonnie instead get boxed up. The narrator states that the company can't continue and it's being shut down after the disappearance of their CEO, William Afton. And since the screen says the end, we can assume that this is the canon ending. But what does this mean for Fredbear's Fright? Honestly, the idea of William possessing prototype as Fredbear's Fright is really funny to me. But, yeah, that's it for the main night gameplay. But there's still so much to see. On top of that, the aforementioned extras, we get Custom Room, an entirely new room that combines most of the mechanics from the other levels, and Insane Mode. Insane Mode is a really difficult version of Tester Mode too, and I'll admit that this was the one I choose. The cutscene you get after shows Nightmare Masiki slumped in darkness. We get another excerpt from Radio Man that says that he's sorry it had to end this way and that maybe there's a way to communicate with him. This might take place after the end, because he says that he'll send in a team to go after Afton, and that it's it for Insane Mode, but we still got the Custom Room. This room is similar to the Observatory, where you shut everything down and escape. But this time you're playing as none other than William Afton. Every character pretty much has the same mechanics as they did in their respective nights, but you get names for all the kids that possess the animatronics. Nightmare Masiki is Timothy, Roger is Roger, Freddy's Jeffrey, Bonnie's Mark, and Fredbear's Lewis. After you beat it, you get a newspaper with talks of another MCI with the text, "You escaped," at the bottom. But if you beat 720, which I did, you get a cutscene of William putting on the suit and kidnapping the MC from the main game, and you get the getaway ending. All things considered, this is a massive game. Before I move to the interview, I want to commend all the designs and environments in this game. All the 3D stuff replicates the Scott Cawthon art style really well, which I like. Once again, Fredbear and Spring Bonnie are pretty standard, but Max has a pretty unique design. According to Garrett, he's a scrapped version of the puppet, which took me a while to even notice, but it feeds into the design really well. Prototypes, once again, are really interesting design with the same beady eyes. The security animatronics are apparently modified Halloween store animatronics, which explains their smaller stature, but their empty eyes and overtly violent weapons really make these designs for me. Nightmare Masika is your usual Nightmare animatronic, but I really like his counterpart Roger. His design with the Michael Jackson fedora and glassy eyes really ties it together. As for his Nightmare Form and Custom Room, it's just a standard Nightmare animatronic. But the Rotten's designs are a bit odd. I don't know, they're not bad designs by any means, but the designs, along with Test Remote 2 as a whole, just feel out of place in this game. Don't really feel like they fit with the rest of the cast. But last and certainly not least, Suit. A Fredbear Springlock costume with eyes that glow in the dark. Honestly, I really like this design. In-game, he just has this menacing aura around him you really can't find with the other characters. It truly feels like a force to be reckoned with. And, if it wasn't obvious, this is the suit William uses to lure and kill the children in this universe, and he's also the one that was in Suit and dies in the true ending. And yeah, that's all I wanted to cover with this game. But, as a longtime fan of this duology, now that I had a reason to, making this video, I wanted to interview Garrett McKay himself about some questions I had about this duology and some general questions on the side. So, I shot my shot, was actually able to get in contact with him, and we did the interview on Discord. At the time of writing, I've also been keeping it posted on the progress of this video on Discord as well. But now I'm going to transition to the interview segment with my questions and then his direct answers. Question 1. How did you get into FNaF as a series?
Around 2013 to 2014 I started watching a lot of indie horror game content on YouTube. One day Markiplier's FNaF 1 video popped up in my suggested videos, and there was just something about it that grabbed my attention. I'm pretty sure it was because the original FNaF game managed to capture the uncanny valley feel of animatronics that I had felt before on a subtle level at Chuck E. Cheese's back in the day. The dark and uncanny atmosphere combined with a mysterious lore kept me invested in the series.
Question 2. What did you find so interesting about Fredbear as a character that you wanted to make multiple games about him?
Fredbear is great as a prompt for fandom concepts. He is an almost blank slate. Around the time I wanted to start getting into game development, I was still really big into FNaF theories, Fredbear's family diner being a major part of them. In my fandoms I wanted to explore what exactly I thought Fredbear's was about.
Question 3. What would you say was the most difficult thing to make in each of the games? One difficult thing in Fredbear's Fright and one difficult thing in Fredbear and Friends Left to Rot.
In Fredbear's Fright it was hard getting into designing and modeling an entire building. The building went through multiple different design plans before settling into its current design. I think the office could have been more unique and the rooms could have been better themed for a horror attraction, which some parts of earlier concepts were better in, but they served their purpose. In Fredbear and Friends Left to Rot, my focus was more on programming. Given the game's larger scope, it's a very intimidating task to try to pull a game of that scale together for the first time.
Question 4. How did it feel when your games got a lot of attention from people like Fusion City Gamer and Dako playing it, to even getting cosplays?
It was very bizarre because in making and releasing Fredbear and Friends Out of the Machine, my first full fandom, it was like I was in my own little dev corner. It got a little bit of attention, but it was very low pressure to work on, since I wasn't expecting many players anyways. Fredbear's Fright, however, started getting a lot of attention after releasing its trailer, so from that point on there was a lot more pressure while working on the game. Pressure can be good because it can push you to make better work, but it also is a little scary knowing how many people may be watching what you're doing. The greatest thing about it is getting feedback after a game's release, because it can help you learn about what game design flaws to avoid going into the future. Outside of the games itself, it is really cool to see fan art of the characters, like it's still a bit unbelievable to me for some reason that someone would spend their own time making something about one of my games.
Question 5. If you were to remake Fredbear and Friends Left to Rot in the present day, what is something you would change or do differently?
The biggest thing would be to redesign the gameplay to flow nicely from one level to the next. In making LTR, my approach to making the game was to make each level different with different mechanics in response to Fredbear's Fright playing too similar to FNaF 1. The problem here is that it can make what the player learns in one level feel useless to the next. What I should have done here is keep the same tools interface in each level and present new ways of using them to interact with enemies. A new tool or ability in each level in addition to old ones could have been interesting. Another major thing would be being more direct with the story. I tried doing everything with the story here through environmental clues and hints though dialogue, but it turns out that's not great when the premise of the game is mostly hidden away. Only years later did a few people look deep into the environment to try piecing the story together. I tried to do a lot different from before when making LTR, and I learned a lot from it.
Question 6. What is your current opinion on FNaF as a whole?
After UC and I started losing interest in the series. I'm all for seeing FNaF in a 3D engine and all, but it's clear the direction has changed in which aspects of FNaF the newer games have chosen to focus on, which are less interesting to me. I still check in on what's been going on in the series, but I'm nowhere near as interested as I used to be.
Question 7. How has it been to move from making FNaF fan games for fun to working on officially endorsed FNaF media, getting paid for your work and whatnot?
It's been very different, mostly because I'm working in a team environment rather than by myself. I'm used to working through the whole process of game development by myself, but this time I'm focused on the 3D modeling aspect of it. I have worked on a scrapped Poco's game before some years ago and had pretty much the same role I do today. What feels different now that it's an endorsed series comes down to the strictness of making it and what could happen as a result of the game being created. There still is fun in working on it, but since it's content that is going to be paid for by an audience, we try to make sure it all fits its role as best as it can. It is neat seeing the results of what can happen because of it being official media, like the recent merchandise that has come out. Otherwise, it's a lot like working on any team project. You want to make sure you're fulfilling your part.
Question 8. What do you think is the most important aspect of what makes a good game?
I would say a good game focuses on the goal of making a specific experience and embodies its traits. It needs a specific theme, and everything about the game needs to reinforce it. This can apply again to FNaF 1, which focused in on creating an atmosphere around the uncanny valley feel of animatronics and managed to put it into the form of a game. Of course, not every player will understand or like that feeling, but since the game built itself around that feeling, I believe that made it a good game.
Question 9. I noticed that Fredbear and Friends Love to Rot has a very Scott Cawthon-esque art style to it with the environments and characters. Was that on purpose?
Absolutely. To get into 3D modeling, I did a bunch of recreations of FNaF models, using it as practice. What's great about Scott's style is that it is simple enough to follow, so making something in his style won't take forever. In LTR, I used Blender Internal to create and render out visuals instead of Blender cycles like in Fredbear's Fright. Internal in some cases could look closer to Scott's style and is still a popular engine choice for FNaF accuracy modelers. However, the visuals are by default much lower quality looking in Internal, so in the end I don't know if using Internal was a great choice for the game. There's a certain color richness to cycles that I couldn't get while using Internal.
Question 10. How did you come up with the more unique characters in this series, such as Max, Mouseki, Nightmare Mouseki, Roger, and Prototype?
These characters were created mostly because I wanted more characters to work with that could potentially exist in that early Fredbear era of FNaF. Max is supposed to be in scrapped puppet concept, so I gave him some features like a fancy hat and weird eyes. The Mousekis and Roger are supposed to be part of a scrap set of animatronics before the creation of Fredbears. For some reason I never really explored their purpose through previous games, which may have helped them feel more connected and purposeful. The prototype characters are just test endoskeletons for upcoming sets of characters, like the one in LTR as a prototype for the FNaF 2 Endo, with face scanners around its head. As you can see, a lot of these characters are created as in-universe scrapped concepts, so they could seem like they potentially exist somewhere in the FNaF universe.
Question 11. Do Fredbear's Fright and Fredbear and Friends take place in the same universe?
Fredbear's Fright and LTR take place in the same universe. There just isn't much that connects the two outside of characters involved. Fredbear and Friends. Out of the Machine also has Fredbear's stuff in it, but is in a separate universe. LTR is essentially a reboot of it that takes place in the Fredbear's Fright universe.
Question 12. What was your general outline of the story of this game, if you want to explain?
Left to Rot is all about my take on Fredbears and exploring the building area it's in. In this universe, Fredbears and Freddies were set up as chain locations, so those training tape cutscenes were set up in preparation for various locations to use. To set up the premise of the game, I thought it would make sense for an investigation to be going on there where the player gets a security job at Fredbear's, deciding to explore the building instead of just staying in an office. Throughout the game, William Afton would be keeping an eye on the player, eventually capturing the player and deciding to use them as a test subject against animatronics, which is meant to go along with the old FNaF 4 experiment theory. If the player does not use the suit controller in the final level, Afton attacks the player and lives on to cause various events at the Freddy's locations, thus, the tragic ending. If the player uses the suit controller, Afton is defeated and Afton's company closes.
Question 13. Is there any never before seen scrapped or unused content you'd be comfortable sharing?
There wasn't much that went unused. Most things created for the game were used in one way or another. One unused thing was a subtitle system for an update a while back, but it was more of a technical challenge with how many separate screens there are that would need to be synced up properly. That's something that would have been better if planned from the beginning, so dialogue could start at times that would benefit the subtitle system.
Question 14. Do you have any future fan games or games in general you're making that you'd like to talk about here?
Before joining Popgoes, I was focused on one original game, but didn't get too far because of some major technical issues that threw off my vision for it. I tried making a couple other smaller projects after having those issues, but just didn't have the right gameplay plans for them. Since then I've taken a step back and focused on just making the plans for a few games, instead of jumping right into them. Over the past couple of years I've been looking into the GarettTube game engine to see if it's something I would like to use for my games. Recently I've started development on a smaller fangame that I could use to practice working with GarettTube, and so far the engine has been amazing to use. This fangame does take place in the French Franks and LTR universe, but is at a different location. It's a bit like the relationship between SL and the previous Freddy's games. Of course, I've also been working on Popgo's Evergreen, so I'll still be hanging around in the FNaF community for a while.
And yeah, at the end of the day, these games really aren't anything crazy in the grand scheme of things, but for what it's worth, these games will always hold a special place in my heart. But hey, Garrett's actually working on a new fan game as we speak, calling to Bite at Freddy's. We haven't gotten a lot of info outside of Kent Carter giving a vague synopsis on his GameJolt account. But, knowing Garrett, I'm sure we got another banger on our hands. My final rating for Fredbear and Friends Left to Rot is 10 Rogers out of 10 leading suits. This has been your friendly neighborhood autistic man, and come back next week when I build enough confidence to get a real job. And I'll see you guys later. Bye!